going to be doing a cool look through history, and there is a fellow named John McDonald who had a computer store in the Vancouver area on Hastings, and he had a really cool collection, like any computer store or used computer store would have had back in the day. And thankfully, he didn't get rid of a whole lot of it. And And so I'm really fortunate to have some of that collection and to be able to share with you some of the cool moments in history. And it's kind of part of my history too, because um, I grew up with a little bit less than most people have for financial means to buy technology. And so one of the first computers I got to play with was a 386 that was lent to us, which we had to give back. And then several of my computers were from thrift stores and purchased with, $40 to $60 worth of birthday money. And so if you join me, I'm going to be going through a little bit of a history from just using some of the things that I've managed to acquire from this really cool collection, starting with things like this 386 here, which had the optional 486 upgrade, and then moseying on down through things like the 486 DX266 boards and how they had the optional, this is actually super rare board, this is the GX4, and how they had the option to upgrade to the Pentium. And then onward we got into our Socket 7 series boards, right? And Socket 7 allowed for the anywhere from the basic Pentium 75s on up to the MMX 166, 200, 233, and overclockable in some cases to 263 using the 66 bus multiplier. So it was a really cool walk through history. And then, of course, we got into our slot 1 boards and how these were sort of a modular chip that you really couldn't screw up. And that was really cool. This one has an ATI Rage 3D built in, a Rage 3D Pro 2X. This board's kind of neat because this board only supported chips that were 128 meg in size. It's permanently soldered to 66 megahertz bus, and later on, these socket or slot 1 boards would eventually allow for a 1 gigahertz or 1,000 megahertz processor, right? And then on up to history into the K62 and Pentium 3, and possibly if we get lucky, we might have some Pentium 4s kicking around. But it's kind of cool, and this is also all possible by the fellow who had this place here, which is no longer, and John passed away sometime in October, I believe. But it's cool because, you see, all I have left from my history of computers are the magazines that I kept of, the era, and, sort of some of the cool things that came out during the time. And, I mean, I'm looking forward to sort of revisiting all the things that happened during that era and actually exploring it in real machines, looking at the processors of the day, like this one here, which is I believe this is a Pentium 233 MMX processor. Basic ones like this is a Pentium 100, and then obviously the 486 varieties. This is a DX4 100, one of the more faster machines, although it's debatable whether they were as fast as Intel's. And even the original releases of the Pentium, this is a kind of pretty rare original Pentium. So this is the Pentium, I believe this is a Pentium 60, which was one of the very, very first Pentium processors that were available. This took a very special board, and that board literally supported, I believe, the 60 and a 90, maybe even just the 60, but extremely rare CPU. Really kind of neat to have that in the collection and to see one in the wild like that. So each of these kind of served a real important piece in history. Here's a 486 DX20 TR-66 Overdrive. And they're all really kind of rare pieces these day and age, so it's going to be neat to kind of go through that history and sort of explore some of those bits and pieces, one piece at a time. And I'll just kind of go through what I'm learning about each piece, how they work, get them powering up, you know, basically working with things like 72-pin RAM. This is a 32 meg 72-pin RAM, ISA video cards, VESA local bus video cards, PCI video cards, and then AGP video cards, and anything from that era, and just kind of going through how they work, why they were released, and just some of the components. I mean, this was a real interesting era of technology, because you see, you had a removable RAM DAC, which is your digital to analog converter to convert to, back then most monitors were analog, so they weren't digital monitors as we have today. And they had their own BIOS, because a lot of motherboards didn't have VGA BIOS. They didn't have the ability to sort of tell the computer how to use a high resolution screen, so they had to have a separate BIOS. Later on, this would be built into your computer, but to this day, video cards have a built-in BIOS, or basic input output system, but they weren't removable. In the olden days, you know, you'd have this chip, and you'd have to use an EEPROM, or erasable programmable device, that would allow you to program a new update into this. If you didn't have that, you could go to the computer store, and they could program an update to this, which would give it more features, more functionality, and possibly more speed. Trident was one of the ones known for not being that great, but still, you could upgrade this, but only digitally. Modern video cards, of course, we can do that with a software update. So, but you could even get updates for your RAM DAC. That's why they're removable. And you could also upgrade your video memory. So, but you had to tell this video card whether it was in a 16-bit slot or an 8-bit slot. You could control the speed of the memory, how much memory you had. You could control all kinds of different things by just changing the jumpers on the card. So explore all that and more.